Hey y'all, this is Miss Welch. I'm just doing a quick video over the chapter 5 and 6 lab assignment to help you out here. First, this is the chapter 5 on tissues. So if you see this lab activity on the slide examination of tissue, this is an eScience activity. So if you go to eScience, this is all the information in case you're getting stuck and it won't let you log in straight from the link, but otherwise you can just go straight to the link. Something I might recommend, if you're having trouble with these lab activities, you might print this out or even just open it in a separate web browser so that when you're working in eScience, you can read these directions again without having to get out of the program. It is a lot of directions sometimes, and I'm telling you step by step what to click and where to go, and you can forget. By the time you read it here and then go to the site, you forget what it's asking you to do. So I would always either print this out or bring it up in a separate browser so you can flip back and forth and read carefully each of the instructions. So before we get there, you can read it, and it says read and take notes. So it's going to have information for you to learn. And then at the bottom of the left sidebar, look for the assignments and procedures. And when you click that, you're then going to download the lab workbook file. Then click the experiment 1 link, which is the slide examination. Complete the post-lab questions in the lab workbook file. So the file we downloaded is where the questions are. It says there are 8 slides to identify, but you don't have to do the other questions. So there's going to be other post-lab that you're not required to do. You're just identifying slides. And that's going to be the answers you upload. So we're going to click over to eScience and take a look at that. Okay, so here in eScience, you're going to scroll down and choose assignments and procedures down here at the bottom. And then you have to go all the way over to the side. I think some of you are having trouble seeing all of this. So there's lab procedures, but then over on the side over here, there's the lab workbook. So this is the document you download that's going to have your questions in it. And then you go to experiment 1 to view the information. So the lab workbook is where the slides are to answer. So then you're just getting to the experiment 1 document here. There's a tissue and skin slide viewer, and this is for practice. And so each of these instructions is telling you to open the slide viewer and observe the tissues and, make yourself some notes. What do these look like? How are they different? How are they similar? And that's all it's asking you to do, is to observe each one in the slide viewer and learn. So this is a lot of practice so that you can understand what each of these different types of tissue look like. Okay, and then it says refer to the introduction for information, and then go to identify those in the post-lab questions. So that's where you're going to go to the post-lab questions after viewing everything in the slide viewer. This is that lab workbook that you downloaded. So there's some pre-lab questions, which you're not required to do, but they're good to think about what's going on before you get started. This is the tissue identification. So here's a picture of a slide, and it's asking you to tell what type it is. So these are the questions that you're going to upload the answers to in the lab assignment in Blackboard. So these are the 8 slides that you are identifying. And then there's so there's 8 of those, and then when you get to the end, there's some post-lab questions. You, again, do not have to do these, but these would be good. If you can answer these, then you understood the assignment. You've understood tissues. Okay, let's move on to chapter 6. So this is in the chapter 6 lab folder. This is lab activity 1, the slide examination of skin. So this is in the same place on eScience. This link goes to the same place because they've grouped tissues and skin together into one unit. So this, all the way to this part, well, it says download the lab workbook. That's the same lab workbook. You've already downloaded that for tissues, okay? Then click experiment 2 link. So we did experiment 1 for chapter 5. Now we're doing experiment 2 for chapter 6. So it says answer the questions in the post lab in the lab workbook file for experiment 2. So you're going to go to that eScience, look at experiment 2, and then answer the post lab for experiment 2. That's where the questions come for this activity. If you clicked the eScience link and then clicked experiment 2 instead of experiment 1, then you get to this document, right? And there's another slide viewer, except this time it's skin. And so you go to that and you view the different skin images, and it's trying to teach you the different parts of skin. You can look at epidermis and dermis and the different things, and then after examining the skin, you can look back at that lab workbook file that you downloaded. So this is that same lab workbook file that we already had open, right? This is the tissue section. We didn't have to do that. You had to do this tissue identification, right? And then you didn't have to do the post-lab questions. And this is all experiment 1 still. You can see this document's like 12 pages long. So now we're at experiment 2, the skin one. So this is where you're supposed to be. So your Blackboard assignment says you don't have to worry about number 1, but it asks you to start with number 2. Identify whether each of these pertains to dermis or epidermis. And so that's where this question is, where you're just putting in Blackboard dermis or epidermis for each of these. And then it has the short answer questions, all about the layers of the epidermis and dermis. Okay, so all of the questions for this activity from eScience should be in this lab workbook. Questions in Blackboard in that assignment to upload are for skin for chapter 6 are from this activity, where you go to this skin cancer clinic and you work through some activities where you try to identify whether someone has cancer or not, skin cancer. So hopefully that helps. If you're still confused on any one of these activities, just email me a question and I'd be happy to help. Thanks.